Hello and welcome to the Voice of Supply Chain, brought to you by ISM New Jersey. I am your host, Katherine McCleery, and I am so excited to be with you guys today. This is a really special episode that we have planned for a really great guest, and I'm sure that most of you have heard about him or seen his name around LinkedIn. And if you haven't, you're gonna be seeing a lot more of him coming very soon. Today's guest is David Yarkin. He is the founder and CEO of Procurated, and he's what I believe to be one of the most respected voices in public procurement. His career has taken him from serving as press secretary to Philadelphia's mayor, leading $4 billion supply chain for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And now he's built and is selling a very successful product in the public procurement space. And he brings a rare combination of experience, entrepreneurial success, and I think a really deep empathy for the challenges in public procurement and procurement at large. So help me welcome the wonderful and brilliant David Yarkin.
Hi, Katherine, and I'm massively blushing from that introduction. So, yeah, thank you. Nice to be with you.
That is my goal. Every time I introduce someone, can I make them blush? Can I make them actually feel good about themselves for the day? Because our guests are incredible. The stories are always second to none. And a lot of times, I think the everyday people in procurement maybe don't recognize the greatness in themselves. And I'm hoping that bringing on guests like you help others recognize that there's a lot of success in what you've done.
Thanks. Well, again, it's great. It's great to be here. And I think you're right. I mean, a lot of times people in our profession are the unsung heroes in their organization. I'm sure it's true in private sector procurement like it is in public sector. So we're hoping to sing a few procurement songs to honor them and to celebrate them.
I love that. A few procurement songs.
Yeah. Unsung no longer.
Yes. That sounds like another title of a podcast, Unsung Procurement Songs.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into it. And if you are new to the Voice of Supply Chain, I'll just remind you that anytime you can pop a question, comment in the comment section of this live broadcast. We can see you come through. I see we've got someone from North Carolina, and we've got another person saying hello. We would love to answer your questions as they come in. And I like to start things off with something very simple. I don't think this is going to be much of a surprise to you, but I would love, David, for you to describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh, jeez. Let's see. I would say empathetic, I hope. Humble, I hope. And balanced, I hope.
Why are we saying I hope?
These are all aspirational things, but I hope I can sort of live up to those ideals.
I think you do. I think you do for sure. And so as we kind of get into your story, my favorite thing is finding out about where you came from. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Massachusetts. I don't want to give away what time frame, but it feels nostalgic for me, 80s-ish,
Yeah.
90s-ish.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So fairly, classic Northeastern U.S. childhood. Grew up in a town called Framingham, Mass., home of Staples, if you're an office supplies buyer out there, and Bose, and TJ Maxx, if you're a discount shopper. My parents are both teachers. My mom was a speech and language pathologist, and my dad was a German and Latin teacher, and then went on to be a guidance counselor in middle school. So really, my my life started off really is with a service mindset that I got from my parents pretty heavily. And so I grew up again outside of Boston, went to public high school in Framingham, which was a great experience. Wanted to get away from the nest a little bit, so I went to college in Philadelphia, and then of course transferred back to a college in Boston. So always sort of came back to the Boston area, perhaps because of my fondness for the Red Sox and the Patriots and Celtics. Sorry to any of you New Jersey, New York folks out there, but yeah. So that was sort of my childhood in a nutshell. Played tennis.
Well, we're gonna crack the nutshell a little bit more, and we've got more people joining from New Jersey. Love to see that. Hi, Evan. Hi, Julie. Hi, Mary. You glazed over something so quickly there. You said that you went to a college in Massachusetts, a little known, university called Harvard.
Yep. Yeah, it was a great experience too. I mean, I transferred, which is, for those of you who have transferred, you probably know it's not always the easiest thing when you come in, halfway into your college years, and a lot of the friendships are already sort of set. So you had to work a little bit extra hard to break through and to break into the community. But Harvard was generally a fairly welcoming place. So it was a nice place to meet people who were like-minded, and many of whom have gone on to become good friends. And in fact, tonight I have a quarterly dinner with friends from school. So looking forward to seeing them tonight and catching up on the wild world that we live in today.
Now let's back up a little bit more before
right.
we'll touch back on Harvard. One of my favorite things to ask people is what did you want to be when you grew up at the time, and how did that change? Because that's going to take us on a journey today.
Yeah. So I had very, I guess I set myself up for this, Catherine, at the beginning by saying I like to think of myself as humble, because my aspirations were probably anything but growing up. So I don't know. I didn't aspire to be a football player or to roam the outfield at Fenway Park. I, as a kid, sort of wanted to go into politics, and the highest office in the land, being a president, was sort of what I was sort of shooting for as a young kid, which I think is probably, as my kids would say today, cringe for that aspiration. But again, I think it was going back to the fact that my parents were both in roles that were serving the public and the community. And to me, as a kid, being president would give you the chance to help the most people in the greatest way. So that was sort of what I was shooting for when I was younger and, naive, but, ambitious.
I mean, I'll help you remove some of the cringe factor, because we talked about this. I also wanted to be a president. That was, age 13 for me when I had to write a report. What do you want to be when you grow up? I said I wanted to be the president while also being a fashion designer. So
yeah,
not exactly humble on my side either.
Yeah.
However, aspirational.
Yeah. And those two things go together, because, think about how many presidents really set the tone for fashion. Look at, John Kennedy, right? And certainly how many of their spouses set the tone for fashion in the country. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And now look at you, extraordinarily fashionable. I
went with my Harvard themed attire today.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yes. Although I don't know what the colors are for Harvard. I'm sure I didn't get it right, but
yeah,
studious.
You'd fit in perfectly.
So you grew up with the frame of mind that you would follow, political science, and that was going to be your avenue. And I see it more as, like you said, you're service minded. You wanted to serve the people. And I think, that did translate, right? Because you did do, that you were into student government at Penn.
Yeah.
And I want to stop there and have you explain why that still exists today and
Yeah. So
what you put into it.
it was funny. So when I got to Penn and started getting involved in different activities, a good friend of mine, this guy, Jason Diaz, he and I were chatting one day and we noticed that the senior class had class officers, president, vice president, et cetera. And those folks were responsible for creating a lot of the social events and different ways to bring that class together. But for some bizarre reason, there was no junior class officers or freshmen or sophomores. And so we went to the administration of the school and we said, we'd like to create this thing. It seemed like it's a big void on campus. And much to our surprise, they said yes. And so we were able to get like a significant budget, and we created this new organization on campus that gave the lower classmen the ability to have people to represent them and to create, really meaningful events for them to help enrich their college experience. And it's funny, I now have two kids in college, and we toured Penn, both of them, and it was really cool to see that these organizations still exist to this day, 20 something years later. So that was pretty neat.
It's quite the legacy to leave on an entire university.
Yeah.
At that level.
I'm glad that that legacy was more memorable than my nights of drinking underage at the local bar, Kavanaugh's.
Right. And I believe you told me that this whole process with the student government, setting that up is what helped you basically get your ticket in your transfer to Harvard, which is pretty cool to be able to say that. I mean, it helped you in the moment for sure. But what was that experience like as you shifted into Harvard and coming from Penn and setting that up? Were you still in the mindset of you wanted to continue on in political science?
Yeah, and that was actually a big reason for the decision to transfer. Was at Penn, I was a European diplomatic history major, which is a very niche but very fascinating major. And I decided I wanted to switch to political science. And my political science professor, a guy named Will Harris, who was also brilliant, he said, look, the department's not that strong at Penn today. If you really want to pursue this, you should transfer to Harvard because it had the best program in the country. So, I decided to get the application and fill it out and talked a lot about the work I'd done with the class officers organization, and mailed it in. And, it was a bit of a lottery because, the acceptance rate is extraordinarily low. And I left campus, as my sophomore year, I left campus, said goodbye to my friends like we all did, fully expecting I'd be returning back to Philly in the fall. And then over the summer, I get a notification that I was accepted. And I was actually really torn because I loved Penn, and I loved the school. I loved my friends. I loved, the atmosphere and the spirit of the school. But when I got the letter from Harvard, I had a hard time doing anything but saying yes.
Yeah, that's an invitation you don't typically turn down, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So let's keep moving along. Well, I won't say fast forward because I don't think it was too soon after your graduation. You went right into, the political arena. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was given a chance to go work for the mayor of Philadelphia, a guy named Ed Rendell, to be his press secretary. And I think I was 21. And it was an incredible opportunity. And it would set the stage for me in my life, in my career, that for whatever reason, I was being given an opportunity that I was completely undeserving and unprepared for. Being the press secretary to the mayor was really an incredible, but also a very intense job to really be, one of the people communicating to the public about what their city government was doing. And it was a very high pressure job because right across the hall from my office was the City Hall press corps, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Daily News, WHYY, which is a great radio station. Probably some of your folks in Southern New Jersey know it. And they could just walk in my office whenever they wanted to and ask me a question and put me on the spot. And so you had to be knowledgeable about a wide range of topics and then be able to communicate your point of view succinctly and compellingly. And I think, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, Katherine, into procurement, but I think it really did prepare me well for my later roles in procurement, because I think one of the real superpowers for a chief procurement officer is communication. I think a lot of people in procurement roles, they're great at what they do. They're strong, they're strategic, they manage their teams well, but they can be very sort of like they have blinders on. They can just look straight ahead. Let's just get our jobs done. Let's meet all of our goals and our obligations, without realizing that being able to communicate about what they're doing and how it ties to the organization's mission is a real superpower. It's what gets you a seat at the table that we're all looking for, with the chief executive officer, with the CFO, with the COO, and with all of your stakeholders and all of the organizations and departments that use your contracts and use procurement. And so I learned at a very early age, in trial by fire, really, how critically important it was to learn how to communicate. And it's something that I think has done well by me over the years since.
I think we should just go ahead and transition. Like, your switch from government to procurement wasn't exactly cut and dry, right? It was essentially applying your skill set, and it just happened to really make sense for procurement. So walk us through how that happened.
Yeah, so I'd worked for Mayor Rendell for a number of years. I actually left for about a year and a half to move to New York with my wife, where she went to go work for Mayor Bloomberg in City Hall, and I got to work right next door for the Department of Education after Mayor Bloomberg had taken control of it. So it was really fun to be literally next door to your wife, although she was working really crazy hours in that job. But then Ed Rendell got elected governor of Pennsylvania, the first mayor of Philadelphia elected governor in, I think, like 100 years. And I went to go see him during his transition, and he said, "I'd love to have you come back and work with me." The state was facing a $2 billion deficit, so he was looking for people that he trusted to come back and help him get control of the budget and save some money. And I said, "I'd love to." And so he said, basically, "Here's a book this tall, and it had all the jobs in the state government. And he said, look through it. If there's a job that you think you'd be particularly well equipped to do, talk to me about it." So I brought the book home, and I sort of flipped through it. And there was this one job that I just kept coming back to because it was so fascinating. Because I wanted to move from a role that was like a communications role, which I'd been doing as his press secretary, to more of an operational role. And the job was Deputy Secretary for Procurement in the Department of General Services. And it was such an interesting job. It was managing the state's procurement operations, which was a $4 billion supply chain organization. We bought everything from paper clips to Humvees for our emergency management department. It was managing a 17,000 vehicle fleet. It was managing and operating 17 distribution centers across the state. And then just for good measure, they also gave me responsibility for 11 print shops. And I was, I think, 28 years old. And again,
that's wild.
It was a good example. And I got the job. And it was a good example, again, of like being given a role that I was not as well prepared as probably as other people would have been for a job of that magnitude. I was certainly young. I was 28. But I was very lucky that the governor-elect had so much confidence and faith in me, knowing I didn't have all the answers on day one, but that I would run it with integrity, that I would be hardworking and industrious, that I would recruit really good people, that I knew what I didn't know, which was a lot, and I'd be able to hopefully do some good work and make him proud and do right by the taxpayers of the state. And I think we did.
I think it calls out how much expertise is actually involved in procurement, right? Because you're laying out a lot of operational and strategic capabilities required for that job, and yet all of that is just wrapped up and bundled into procurement. It's so much more than spending money.
Right. It's so true. And I mean, maybe in some ways, I think procurement never gets the respect it deserves. And maybe I was an example of that the governor would give someone with very limited procurement experience this massively important job. And I'm lucky he did. But yeah, you're right. There's so much complexity wrapped inside of it. And for me, like the first step along the way to running this was a recognition that was really first and foremost about people and about leadership. So I came to Harrisburg on a very snowy day in the beginning of 2003, and met with the managers of each of these 4 units that I would inherit. And I quickly decided that all 4 were very nice, good, earnest people, and all of them were unfortunately out of their leagues. None of them had any experience in running procurement or fleet or warehousing or printing. And so I realized quickly that if I was going to make an impact, I would have to go out and recruit a new team.
A tiger team.
Yeah, a new team. And I also learned quickly that because it's inherently a political environment, a lot of the people who got these roles were political appointees. They knew the governor, they knew a state senator or something. And I just decided if we were going to make a big difference and make an impact quickly and put a dent into this $2 billion deficit, I couldn't just hire some political hack, right? I had to hire people who knew what they were doing. And I was able to. So I hired a guy named John Troxel to run the purchasing division. And John had been the CPO for Tyco Electronics and had managed a supply chain organization across 5 continents. And he was a great pick right out of the dictionary, the encyclopedia for a CPO. And he was just terrific. And to accompany him, or to sort of compliment him, I hired a young guy at the time named Kurt Topper, who had been with a company called Free Markets. I don't know if you know Free Markets. They were one of the early reverse auction companies that was bought by Ariba. So I hired the 2 of them to come in and really help me on procurement. I hired a woman named Josie Sharp from Aventis Pharmaceuticals in New Jersey to come in and run our fleet. She was the first female fleet manager in the history of the state, which was a really wonderful dynamic. She was just a sort of badass. She was smart and thorough and had high expectations. And it was great watching her take over a department that was just full of men, and watch her bend the organization to her will and help us do some great things. And then I hired this great guy to run our warehouse operations, who had been the Kmart logistics manager for the Mid-Atlantic. And he did great things. And so together, we had this really wonderful team of folks that came from the private sector that were totally apolitical. They probably didn't even vote for the governor. And I was able to sort of manage up, manage the relationships with all the departments, with the governor's office, with the budget office, with the IT office, and then help to chart a path for our teams to go down, and then let them run a lot of the day-to-day while I managed sort of the strategic direction and the vision for the organization. And it worked out extremely well.
It was like a practice run for being CEO, right?
Perhaps.
Getting the right people in the right positions with their aligned to their expertise, and getting out of the way.
Yeah, if you've read Good to Great, you want to get the right people in the right seat in the bus. And if you have the right people but they're not in the right seat, it doesn't work. So, and that's what we were able to do. We did it pretty quickly. I think all the people I hired into senior roles in the state ended up working out really, really well, which is not always the case, but the stars were lined up really well. And then we had in the governor this very powerful guy who completely understood and was bought into what we were doing in procurement and was extraordinarily supportive. And I'll give you one quick story. So we launched a very aggressive strategic sourcing initiative with a goal of saving over $100 million. And we knew to be successful, we'd have to really eliminate any maverick or rogue spend, just like you would in the private sector. And we were starting to get a sense that some of the departments, the agencies, were not really on board. They wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to buy off of contract with the vendors they preferred. And we talked to the governor about it. So he called a meeting of the cabinet, all the cabinet secretaries. And he said in the meeting, this initiative in strategic sourcing is not David's initiative, it's my initiative. And if any of you are bucking it or going off contract or aren't really following along and being a part of this, you're going to have to answer to me. And to get that kind of support from the chief executive was invaluable. And I'm sure there are people listening in from the private sector who are very envious and wish their CEO would drive that kind of compliance like I benefited from. And we were able to sort of take the momentum of that and take his support and translate it to $140 million of recurring savings in procurement during my tenure. And I think $360 million of total savings, annual savings, by the end of his administration after I'd left. So he was rewarded for his faith in us and his commitment to running procurement in the way that, hopefully the best run businesses run their procurement operations.
Yeah, those numbers are not insignificant. those are great figures to put on your resume and a feat for the state.
For sure. And I talked at the beginning about communications and how important that is. What we were able to do together by me communicating up to him about the savings, he was able to take the savings we achieved and use all of that money to fund early childhood education. So kids all across Pennsylvania, before they even got into kindergarten, were getting the chance to go to a school to get structured education and learning in those 2 to 4 years old timeline, which was a great thing for the citizens. It was a great thing for him sort of politically. And he was able to do it only because of the savings that my team delivered. So it was a really nice way to, again, as I said at the beginning, to sort of tie what's happening in procurement to the larger goals of the organization.
I feel like what's surprising learning about this story in particular, and a lot of the other stories that you've told me about being in public sector procurement, is that I feel like there's a misconception about public procurement maybe not being as quick or effective, efficient as private, because I think that label gets placed on a lot of government systems. But in your experience, because it seems like more emphasis on bottom line and what you can do strategically with savings, it seems like probably a better outcome than what maybe some CPOs achieve in private.
Yeah, I think it is an unfair at times misconception. We in public procurement, we are burdened, if you want to use that word, by having to jump through hoops that you don't have to jump through if you're in the private sector, right? We have to go out to bid. We have to run competitive procurement events because that's part of the law. If you don't do that, then all of a sudden people are, given contracts because they're political donors, and that's awful. So you have to do these things. You have to run your operations in ways that take time and add steps to the process. So the fact that people in government procurement can accomplish these incredible things is really a testament to them, given some of the burdens. But I would say on the other side of it, because government can have a bit of a command and control aspect to it, where when the governor says thou shalt do something, people have to do it. Whereas and I spent some time in private procurement with a company called Bertelsmann in New York. And when we tried to do strategic sourcing across the enterprise there, the CEOs of the different business units, Random House Books, BMG Records, they had a lot of clout, and they could just say, "No, I don't feel like doing that." And it was hard for the CEO of Bertelsmann to sort of push them and say, "No, you must." Whereas here, having the governor bought in and driving that kind of compliance was invaluable.
There it is. It's the compliance factor.
Yeah.
You're bound to different rules on the public side.
For sure. Yep.
And we did kind of move quickly through your childhood, but I have a note here for myself that there are moments in your young college and early career where there are moments of like you've got a chip on your shoulder and things, moments where you want to prove yourself. And I feel like as you are taking this job and there's the huge deficit that you're having to reverse, essentially, did that feel like one of those chip on your shoulder moments where you're like, all right, this is a huge challenge and I'm gonna prove that I can do it?
For sure. I mean, I think everyone's motivated in different ways, but for me, the single best way to motivate me is to tell me I can't do it. And that's happened a bunch of times. Like so when I was working for the New York City schools, I was managing this big project with McKinsey, looking at all the operations of the New York City school department, including procurement. And after that project ended, this guy who was in the leadership team said, "Well, what do you want to do next as you transition out of this one?" I said, "Well, I'm interested in actually running procurement for the schools." And he sort of laughed and he's like, "No, you can't do that. You don't have the experience." And then, 3 months later, I was running a $4 billion supply chain organization. But then I get to Harrisburg and I'm meeting my team. I met one-on-one with each of the members of the procurement team, which was great. And this woman came into my office and she said, "Hello, Mr. Deputy Secretary. I'm so-and-so. I won't use her name." And she said, "I want you to know that I've been in this department longer than you've been alive." And her point was subtle, but also clear, which was, I'm going to be here after you leave. So don't think that you can just come here with a bunch of new ideas and force them on us because we're going to outlast you. And it was a bit of a chip on the shoulder, but also it was a bit of a humbling moment to realize as much as I wanted to do and make big change, I think we did, I was a caretaker. The seat was being passed to me from someone, and I would be passing it on to someone else. And all I could do was try and do the best I could do during that time. And again, I think with $140 million, I think we did it. But her comment to me was also very humbling.
Yeah, the idea of stewardship, I think, in the public sector is so different than private. And I've never been a CPO, obviously, in either sector, but I would imagine that a CPO on the private sector side is not as concerned about their incumbent and what they're inheriting.
Yeah, they may not be. I mean, I would think if it were me, knowing that the team you're inheriting have been through the previous direction of the previous CPO, and they're probably going to be there for the next one. I think if the pendulum shakes so violently from one to the next, it can be a bit disruptive. But I think understanding the context, how did you get to this point? What was the decision that informed this strategy? You can choose to move in a different direction as we did. But if you're not curious enough to ask why you did something a certain way, then maybe you lose some of the context.
What's your proudest achievement from public procurement?
I think it was just around the savings that we achieved. So we saved $140 million during my time there. But what I think I'm even more proud about, although that number is big and I think, terrific because of what it could do for the people of the state. But what was really exciting to me was the fact that after I left, they went on to add another $220 million of annual savings, in part because as part of this effort to reform procurement, we created a shared services center and we brought our team up from 20 buyers up to 80 by taking some of the procurement staff from the departments and bringing them into our central organization. But also, and that helped to fuel the savings for sure. But just the fact that what we started outlasted me, and they continued to drive year after year of continued savings long after I had left, was to me a real great accomplishment, that it was sustainable. It wasn't dependent on me or any one person. And that by leaving, I think actually the organization got stronger after I left, because the people who had been in the rung below me, they all advanced in different ways. I think if I had stayed there for all 8 years, folks may have left, they may have been bored, they may have felt they were hitting a ceiling. But by me leaving, the motion that we put in place continued and accelerated. And rather than people leaving, people got promoted, got great opportunities, and went on to do incredible things. And I think leaving the state was probably one of the single best things I did for the state.
I love that I forgot to bring this up, the shared services model. That was such a cool thing to implement. And I feel like that's a huge lesson that can be applied, I think, any corporation.
For sure.
To achieve that, so that it's just an accelerant of efficiency.
For sure. I mean, you can't drive savings. Well, maybe you can in the AI era, but pre-AI, you really couldn't drive sourcing savings without people leading sourcing events. And so I just needed more people to do it. And it was an easy case to make to the governor that, in order for us to continue to save money, we need a broader team. And by creating more contracts centrally in central procurement, the departments, the agencies, the corrections, the DOTs, they didn't need the staff anymore because we were doing a lot of that work on their behalf. So yeah, it was a smart and maybe obvious move, but I think the team executed it really well.
You brought up a really good point, and I think this is a fun little tangent, real quick. That was pre-AI. Yeah. Now that we are in the age of AI and in business, and it's embedded in a lot of what we do day to day, how do you think sourcing events are going to change now?
I still think that the actual, the work of bringing together a group of power users to develop your requirements together and understand the business needs of the new contract, negotiating with the suppliers, I think a lot of that still will remain human. But I think, for example, to support us, we had Accenture come in for 18 months to help support that work. And a lot of it was just crunching through data. And I think that work is almost exclusively done now by AI and maybe one data scientist. So I think, to do strategic sourcing in a meaningful way, I think is probably would be profoundly different and probably a lot less expensive than it was for us in bringing on Accenture, as great as they were.
Maybe less manual RFP generation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, if you don't think AI is going to have a profound impact on procurement, you're probably not paying attention.
So let's skip over to, okay, your time in public sector comes to an end. You leave, yep. Right? And yep. You think, as you said, the state is better off for it. What's the next move for you?
Well, it's interesting. I ended up going into the private sector and starting 2 companies, but it's interesting that the roots or the genesis for this company, for Procurated, really started during my time with the state. So one of the things that I really noticed when I was running procurement is we invested all this time with strategic sourcing, creating these brand new contracts that were saving the state all this money. But we were doing absolutely nothing on the back end to make sure that the vendors we selected were actually doing a great job for the departments that counted on them. And I'll give you, if we have time, a quick story.
Yeah.
So we created a brand new contract for food. And the food vendor was going to be delivering food next day to 20 state prisons, 20 state hospitals, and 5 veterans homes across this huge state. It's a big, important contract that saved us lots of money. So we go live with the contract, and I hear nothing for 8 months. So my assumption, Katherine, was things must be going really well. Food must be getting there. We must have very happy customers because I'm not hearing anything. And the truth was, while ignorance was bliss, it was also a miss. Pardon the rhyme. That came to me. But it was a miss because 8 months later, my lawyer walks into my office and says, "I have bad news for you. Our food vendor just informed us that they're walking, that next week they're going to stop servicing the state." And so now my team and I had to figure out a way to get food in a week's time every day to 45 facilities across this huge state. And procurement, like it always does, got it done. We scrambled by hook or by crook. We figured out a way to get food to all these locations, but we paid through the nose because we had to get food really on an emergency basis to all these locations. And we had all these legal bills with all the legal back and forth of the vendor who was, about to be in breach of contract. And probably most important, my department, after being like the shining star in the organization, took a huge reputational hit. And I was in full-fledged damage control with the departments, prisons and health, who relied on this contract, who they felt like we let them down. I mean, think about what could be more critical to a customer than food, right? Yeah. I mean, imagine an inmate in a prison who has one thing all day to look forward to, which is their meal. If they don't get food on that person's tray, prison riots happen that way, right? Governors get unelected that way. And we in procurement, because we didn't have a way of tracking how our vendor was performing, we threatened, the political future of our governor. And we really threatened, the sustenance of prisoners and patients and veterans across the state because we had no visibility into what was happening out there until all of a sudden, 8 months later, whatever problems were happening boiled over and the whole thing erupted. Interestingly, after this happened and the dust settled, I said to my team, go back to these 45 institutions and ask them if things were hunky-dory for those 8 months. And of course, they weren't. Turns out one prison had a problem one day. Next week, one of the hospitals had a problem. And then 2 weeks later, 3 or 4 hospitals and prisons had problems. These problems were stacking up, but they were trying to be resolved one at a time on a one-off basis. So it never got back to me there was a problem. And I'd like to think that I have the empathy and the care that if I heard there was a problem in 45 different locations with one vendor every single week, I would have seen it, I would have brought the vendor in, and we would have found a way to resolve the issue or had an orderly transition. But I never had those data points. And so I never had the chance to solve that problem. So up the state, I started a consulting company. We worked with, I think, 34 states across the country, helping them find savings. I sold that company to a private equity firm. But then I started my current company, Procurated. And the problem that had been in my brain, for all those years, 15 years, about not that crisis I faced with the food contract, I finally had a chance to solve it. And that's what we're doing at Procurated. We have a product called Canary, and it does exactly what I would have needed it to do when I was in Pennsylvania. It tells me as a procurement director, CPO, exactly how all my vendors on contract are performing every day for all of my departments across the state or across the city or university. And the belief is that it'll help them head off that same kind of crisis that I faced in Pennsylvania with the food contract, and that everyone faces fairly often, by giving them visibility into how the vendors are performing. So if there is an issue, they can spot it while it's small and early and solvable.
I love that. I think one of the greatest things about speaking with founders is the best stories are when they create a product that solves a problem that they themselves experienced And I'm sure for those listening, there have been many, I don't want to call them nightmares, but maybe some really rough experiences sourced from poor performance on suppliers and what could have been easily avoidable. So do you feel like Procurated and Canary specifically was built for the David Yarkin of years past?
I think so, and hopefully the David Yarkin of years future. Yeah, so we released Canary last January, and in 1 year's time, 14 states signed contracts to start deploying it as part of their workflow, which is amazing that in just a year, it became the most widely used technology by state procurement offices across the country. So it's been extremely exciting to sort of watch it and to see, how folks are using it and how it's really solving problems for them. Which, going back to where we started, Katherine, like my life has always been about service and about mission. And this is something that my parents put in my DNA, from early age. And that to me is what's so rewarding. And maybe it sounds corny or cliched or whatever, but whenever we sign a new customer, and I know ahead of time once they sign that we're going to help them eliminate these poor performance issues, it's extraordinarily gratifying.
What's one thing that you have learned from your customers in procurement that you weren't aware of before, or maybe has shed some new light for you?
It's a great question. I think, to me, it's that software by itself does nothing. Software enables great outcomes if the people using it, are awesome. And I'll give you a quick story. The state of Louisiana is one of our great customers, and they noticed in Canary, because they were alerted to it, that one of their vendors was really performing poorly. They had like a 2.8 star rating. And so they saw that immediately, and they had the wherewithal to bring the vendor in, to sit them down, to show them all the data that was in Canary. And within 3 months, the vendor went from being one of the worst performing vendors in the state at a 2.8 out of 5 star rating to being one of the best at a 4.6. And it was a great story because it encapsulated for me like the power of software to be able to help people make really great decisions that improve people's lives. But also in some ways, the fact that software is really relying on people to use the information to change the outcomes. So that was probably like a great learning for me about it.
And I love the empathy displayed by the state's procurement to even involve the supplier and say, hey, let's improve this. We know you're better. Like, let's figure it out.
For sure. I mean, this is where private sector and public procurement sector are very much aligned. We really do rely on having suppliers as partners to improve operations and to improve the delivery to our end users. Can't do ourselves. And that's something that we learned in Pennsylvania, that we're learning every day here at Procurated. I'm sure, a lot of your listeners live every day.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this thing up with you telling us just a little bit more about what we can expect to see from Canary this year. Anything notable that you would love this audience to hear about?
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, even though we've started with public sector procurement, I think the need is as significant in private sector procurement. And we're very happy to talk to anybody who wants to explore it on the private side. So feel free to get in touch with me. So this year, Procurated, like I think all companies, is really leaning into AI. So we're already using AI to sort of sift through all the reviews that we collect. We're now at over 100,000 reviews, all by verified buyers. We use that data to read all the reviews, use AI to read all those reviews, and to help draw insights that come out of them. But more and more, we're going to be using AI in more of a predictive way to be able to say to a procurement professional, this vendor, we predict will create supply chain risk for you based on what's happening here for you in your government, but also we're seeing across all of our customers. So that's one thing that we're really excited about. And then second, we're excited to start leaning into a little bit into workflow. So, okay, Canary has identified that a performance issue exists with this vendor. So what? We want to help extend that a little bit so that we've identified the issue, and then we've created easy tools for both the contract manager and the vendor to identify, to see the issue, to fix the issue, to track the fact that it's been fixed, so that we can have really clearly showing the impact that we're having, not just in showing problems, but fixing problems.
Yeah, have something that's actionable. Like you're surfacing a lot of data, a lot of insights, and I'm sure it's super helpful to have that visibility alone, but to be able to act on it within the platform, I'm sure is going to be a game changer.
Yep, I think it will be.
Awesome. Well, we are coming up on time, and so I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us a very different perspective on the public sector side that we have not yet had on this show. So I appreciate you so much. And for everybody else listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to tune in again next month. We have another great guest on the show, Daniela Osio of Klupify. Another conversation I cannot wait to share with all of you. Again, David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Katherine. It's great being with you.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you next time.